So this is the continuation of the previous video. In the last video we started to understand how to change the access rights of sector block, and we also discussed the access bit that is 1, which is also called as the factory setting, and we came to know that in this configuration probably most people they use the word called configuration whenever they speak about the access bits. So when the configuration is set to 1, so we have got key A and access bits and key B, they're all changeable, and most often this configuration get changed. They don't stay longer than maybe as soon as you start using them, the card with this configuration will get personalized to some other configuration, because this configuration is not safe. Now we know that any new card you buy has got the key set to all FFs. Now I would advise not to keep the value of this key, so you have to change the default key values to something else, even though you're not using all the 15 sectors or all the 32 sectors in the Mifare 4K tags. So I'd advise you to first thing do is change all the default keys. Don't keep the default keys for either A or B. And here we also seen that the key B is readable. So wherever you come across key B as readable, you cannot use that for authentication. Now I'm going to use the same tag I've used in the last videos, and I'm going to change the value of the sector tiler to 0. That's what we're going to discuss next. I'm going to activate. We'll hit the read entire tag. You can see that the read is not successful for sector 0 and sector 1 because I already modified the key values. Whenever you hit the read entire tag button, it always uses the default keys as FFs. It just keeps sending the read sector for all these 15 sectors. Whenever the read is a failure, the software ignores and continues with the remaining sectors. If you look at the various commands that are used, you can see that the authentication for block 0, that's the sector reading from sector 0, is failed because SW and SWT is 6300. The authentication for the next sector is also a failure here. And keep in mind, the authentication command is based on the block address, not the sector number or the block number within the sector. So for example, here I want to authenticate, or the software uses the authenticate command for the block address 8, which if you go and see the block numbers here, this corresponds to the sector 2. Now because this is the factory setting, all the 3 things are changeable. Now I'm going to first authenticate the sector 2 here. I'm going to authenticate. I'm going to change the value of the key or key to A0, A1. So I'm going to right click, change the access rights, set this to 0, say OK, and hit the right button. When the right is successful, I'm going to reactivate. I'm going to authenticate, and I'm just going to read the sector number 2 with the modified key. The software still doesn't have a feature that allows you to update or change all the default keys. Probably we're going to provide that in the later releases. Authenticate and say read the sector, and now we have got the sector trailer access right set to 0. The next thing is we're going to discuss all the things you can do when sector trailer access bit set to 0. Now in this configuration, the key A is still writable, but the access bits are not writable. So you cannot change the access bits. The key B is still writable and key B is still readable. So that means we cannot use key B for authentication. The 6 bytes of key B can be used to store any user data. Now this configuration has got some interesting features. The configuration is frozen because the access bits are not changeable. However, the keys are still changeable. So you might come across a software requirements where you don't want the users to change the configuration, but you want to change the values of the key. So it all depends on what you want to do in your software. So it's not, you have to, if you know what the access bit 0 can do, probably you can maybe your requirements might need all these features. So here only the most important thing here is the configuration is frozen, so I cannot change the configuration any further. Let's go and see now what's going to happen in the software. Now here we are in configuration 0. So if I have to modify key A, I have to authenticate with key A. So access bits, it says it's only readable, but again, in order to read, you have to authenticate with key A, and key B is both read and writable. So I'm going to just change the value of the authentication key to, probably I'm going to play here with the last, just don't waste time here. So make it as A6. So I'm going to right click and change the access rights. Assume that I want to get it back to the factory setting. Probably now I'll also make some small changes to key B as well. 6. When you try to write, now the write is successful, but let's see what exactly the successful message means. I'm going to read the sector again. You can see that somehow the read has failed. Now probably now best is to reactivate. Yeah, I think the read failed because we did modify the value of the key. Now I'm going to modify this, change the key to the right value and authenticate. It's not for sector 0, sorry, it's for sector 2. Authenticate is successful. If I try to read, you can see that even though we try to modify the access bits to 1, we got back the original access set to 0. So this proves we cannot modify the access bits. However, we are able to modify the value of key A and key B. Now one more thing you have to keep in mind here is, we know that B6, B7, B8 is what the access bytes are. One more byte, that's a B9. So I mentioned that this can be used to store some user data. However, so this B9 also becomes part of the access bits. So you can consider the access bytes as the 4 bytes, because whatever you can do with the access bytes or will also apply for the B9. So we'll try to write this. So write, and if you try to read, look at that, you got back 69. So this is what you need to know about this the B9. And also one important thing what you have to keep in mind is, whenever you are about to change the values of the key, either key or key B, you have to remember, you have to know the values of the key. Assume that you want to modify the value of say key B, and key A is not readable at all. So because the software is the one that's showing you the values of the key, but if you look at the data that is written from the card, the key A is always 000. Now if you try to, most often you'll end up, if the software did not do this showing the keys, you'll have the sector block that looks like this. And now if you go and try to change the value of the key B, and if you hit the right button, and you lost the value of key A. If you try to go and read, you can see that so just make sure that the read is successful. I'm going to key in some random number here. So here I have to now authenticate with the key 0. So authenticate and read. So this is something you know to keep in mind when you start changing the values of the keys. So now we have a sector where the access bits are frozen. So the next thing we're going to discuss is the access bit 2. So I'm going to use a different sector, set this to factory value and say authenticate and read the sector 3. I've read that. Now I'm going to change I can still, I'm going to keep the values of keys the same. I'm going to change the value of the sector trailer to 2. Now just before I hit this the write command, I'm going to see what exactly is that the sector. So it's not set to 2, but I have to set this to 2. Okay, so here what 2 does is, so there's nothing under the column key A, so it means you cannot read and cannot write. So now key A is frozen, so you cannot read and you cannot write. The access bits is only readable, so you cannot, that means the configuration also frozen, and also the key B is readable, so that means key B can be used as a user data. Now this, in this configuration, okay, this is pretty interesting. So it looks like, you know, you got a frozen, you got a card that is already personalized, frozen, and you cannot modify neither key or key B. So I'm going to hit W. So next we have got the configuration value set to 2. So here we just saw that, so key A is not writable. Now it also means, you know, here you have to change the value of key A before you set this configuration, because key A is no more writable. The access bits are not writable and is going to freeze the configuration. The key B is not writable, however it's readable, so that means you can use these 6 bytes for user data. Again, you know, change if you want, you know, if you want to change. So this is something like a read-only 6 bytes. So you have to change the value of key B before you do that. And some of the users are this like a personalized card. See, nothing is writable here. All the 3 parts in the sector trailer, key A, key B, and access rights, and none of them are writable. So this is like a completely a frozen or a personalized card. So let us try to modify and see now what the software or the card does. Now I will try to modify the value of key A. Change this to say 00. I'm also trying to modify key B as well as the configuration as well. Change the access rights. Try to set it back to 1 and say the write. Now we got a write error. So if I try to reactivate, so read, so you can see that, you know, nothing has been modified. So try to do it again, 00. So write, no, write fails. I'm not sure why we get the write failed here, however, so probably another firmware which is sitting inside this reader writer, probably, you know, it's returning this 6300. So what we just saw is when the configuration set to 2, we cannot modify the key A or access rights or key B. Next is when the configuration value is set to 3. So this is a very interesting and very very common configuration, and this has got some of the features that are used in your real life applications as well. So some of the features of configuration 3 is the key A is writable but after authentication with key B. The access bits are writable but after authentication with key B, and key B is also writable but after authentication with the key B. So it looks like the key B is the more prominent key here. In all the previous configuration it was key A. So some of the users are, as I mentioned just now, the key B is the primary here, and this configuration is very popular with when the data blocks have got the value blocks. And some of the users are like key B acts as a master key which can be used to change the value of the key A, and key A is behaves as a card key that is used to, you can authenticate and use the key A for data access operations like value block operations or read and write. Now this is a very common, as I mentioned before, it's a very common configuration where you can use one key as a master key and other key where the key A is as like a card key, and we're going to see now how to work with this configuration now. Now I cannot use this sector 3 because this is set to configuration 2 where the access bits are not modifiable. So I'm going to use sector 4, authenticate and read. Now we got sector 4 which is still in the factory setting. I'm going to change this to the configuration 3, and probably you can keep all this as a default, or you can set this this to 00, set this to 00, and so right click and change here to 3. Okay, if you hit the right is successful. So we have got, if you try it, I can't read here because the value of key A is changed. Now I'm going to read. Zero zero, authenticate, read this. So if you look at all the 16 bytes received from the card, you can see that the value of key A is all set to zeros because key A is not readable at all. However, here the key B is the prominent key and you cannot read the value of key B. So in order to do any changes here, you have to first authenticate with key B. I'm going to try to change the configuration. Say for example this byte B9, I'm going to change this to 00 and give a write. Now we got error because, so if you remember, if you go back to this table here, so we are in configuration 3. In order to change the value of a key A, you have to authenticate with B. What we did was we just authenticate with the key A. And also if you want to change the access bits, you have to authenticate with the B again and B again here to change the value of key B. Now if I go here, we know that the key was set to 00 followed by FFs. Say authenticate, it's successful. I can read it. Now I'm going to change this time the value of it's already changed here, it's not refreshed. Just say write. So it's a successful write. So if I want to change the value of key A, set this to 00, 01, 02, 03. I'm going to change the value of the key B also to say 30, 31, 32, 33, 34 and 3, that's it, 34. think it should start from B10 here. I'm going to keep it 00. Say write. So the write is successful. We just modified the value of key A and key B. And if you try to read, so error because the keys are modified. You have to re-authenticate using the modified keys. Let's say authenticate and read. So read is successful. Read again. Read is successful. So we are going to come to this, use this configuration when I discuss in detail about how to use data blocks.